Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video episode on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. Today I have the great privilege of speaking with Dolf Goldsmith. Dolf is a genuine expert on the Vickers, the Maxim, and the Browning machine guns, having written 4 volumes on the Browning and a book each on the Vickers and the Maxim. Definitely the best reference guides on those guns that are out there. So I'd like to thank you for speaking with us today.
Well, thank you very much for asking me to come out here.
Having a good time at the show today?
Oh, yes. Well, so far it's been a little chilly.
A little bit.
It'd be better in an hour or so.
Yeah.
I had a pretty good show, sold a fair amount of stuff.
All right.
Saw a lot of interesting things I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff here.
Yeah, really some interesting stuff. A lot of good stuff is coming out of the woodwork now that the economy is slow and people are needing to raise money, so you see a lot of good stuff coming out that I have never seen before.
Really? Even stuff you haven't seen?
Oh yeah, a lot of stuff I haven't seen.
Cool. So, there are a lot of people my age or kind of my age who don't have, there's all sorts of things that were around when you were collecting that we're never going to see. What are some of the more interesting things that you've seen that you think would be cool for some of the young guys like us to know about?
Well, it's difficult to say. It's all pretty interesting, but you don't see many of the old guns around anymore, like the Hotchkiss, Schwarzlofer Belly, any of that kind of gun. You don't see them around. Most everything you see is modern stuff. And of course, you see a lot of Vickers and Maxim and Brownings, but that's one reason for that is because they have been made aftermarket guns, made on new side plates, and while you still could do that, and also semi-automatics. And that's going to be a big thing coming up from now on, is the semi-automatics, for 2 reasons. Number one, they'll be more affordable. Number two, ammunition is going to be harder and harder to get as foreign countries' surplus is all drying up. And they're legal in many places where where full automatics wouldn't be legal. So that is probably the big thing in machine guns, but it's still not the same as shooting a live one.
Yeah. But
what people will do, they'll probably have 1 or 2 live guns, and full autos, and the rest of the guns will be semi-autos. Now they're making almost every gun you can think of. Brens and ZBs and MG34s. I don't know about a 42. I haven't seen the semi-auto 42.
Yeah, I think those are
Maxim. Of course, the Maxim, Vickers, and Browning, and so all the submachine guns, but they have that normal barrel.
Right.
And they all made in semi-automatic form. They may look like a machine gun, but they're not a machine gun, so they're legal. And another thing that I think will get people interested, people will become interested in the old mechanical machine guns that hand operated.
Yeah.
And Robert Siegel and I are working on a book that's going to cover a lot of the old stuff. That has not been written about much before.
That's true. There aren't many resources.
No, there's not too much written on that. So I think that's going to be the future. As for the old stuff, well, sooner or later, the people that have it are going to die, and then the relatives, generally speaking, prefer to have the money.
Right.
And it'll come on the market again.
Okay.
But the only problem is prices are so much higher.
Right.
When I was a kid, you could buy a Maxim for $25. You could buy a show for $20. You could buy a Lewis for $20. $29. I knew one fella, he collected machine guns, and it was his dictum that he would never pay over $50 for any machine gun. Wow. And he had a very large collection.
I wish we could still do that.
And that was partially due to the fact that everybody thought they were illegal.
Okay.
They didn't realize that they were legal in most states. They did not realize that, and they thought, well, machine guns are illegal here in New York. They were, of course, they were in New Jersey. They've always been illegal. So they went in Illinois, so they didn't realize that was only a state regulation, not a federal regulation.
Okay.
You can, as long as you qualify and you pay the tax and the people will sign for you, you can have a machine gun in a state that's legal. And people didn't realize that until the internet brought that fact to their attention.
Okay.
And since then, the interest in collecting machine guns has gone up tremendously. Now, there was also another thing that held back the machine gun collecting in the early days. There was a stigma attached to it. Machine guns were gangster weapons. And a lot of gun collectors who prided themselves on the correctness of things said, you can't own a machine gun, that's a gangster weapon. You don't own anything else. You can have a Springfield, or you can have a Civil War carbine, or you can have a Luger or anything, but you can't have a machine gun. And that stigma has gone away to some degree. People don't think about it. But in the 40s and 50s, the gangster days of the 30s were still very much in people's minds. Yep. Now it is almost like an ancient history.
Yeah.
You know, people don't think about it anymore. And machine guns are not really being used in crimes.
Right.
It's pistols. If anybody's going to commit a crime, it's with a weapon, it'll be a handgun.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be a Vickers or a Browning.
You can't, because of the concealability and
right.
all the rest of it. And you know, the funny thing about machine guns is that they were really, they were more area suppression weapons in the military than they were weapons that were designed initially just to kill a lot of people. They were more to keep everybody's heads down. Yep. We had an interesting demonstration we used to put on in the Army. There'd be one fellow with an M1 rifle and a fellow with a BAR. And everybody thought, oh, the guy with the BAR is going to knock down more targets. Well, he shoots 4 times as much ammunition. But the guy with the good shot with the M1 had all his targets down before the machine gunner had them down. With only a quarter of the ammunition. So the stigma of the machine gun that it had, when I was a kid collecting it, that existed to some degree as a kind of a stigma, but not on Maxims and Vickers. Those were not machine guns. They were war souvenirs.
Okay.
The law in '34 was written mostly against the Thompson, and nobody really cared much about Maxims and Vickers and all that. They were just things people brought back from the war, and the government brought back and gave to people.
Yeah, there are a lot of them handed out to EAV bases.
Sure, my aunt got one. She was high up in the Red Cross in World War I. She had a high position in the Red Cross. And she was sent one after the war. Came in our Railway Express one day and with a tag tied on it. And just not even in a box, just loose. And, and it came in and she, what's this? And she said, well, tag on it says, in appreciation for your service during World War I or the Great War or whatever they called it. And I said, Aunt Amy, have you still got the tag? I threw it away. Oh, what a shame. Yeah. I still have the gun though.
Nice.
I talked her son out of it.
Okay.
Gave him a 22 for it.
That's
and
amazing.
It's a mint edition MG08.
Nice.
And that's how they handed these things out as souvenirs. But they took the bolts out. Came without the bolt.
Okay. Not that would have to slow us down
Well,
today.
you wouldn't be able to make a Maxim bolt. Wouldn't be too easy.
No, not to make them.
But there were big guys. There were people that actually would have attempted to make them. And, they probably could have done it.
Okay.
But it would have been a difficult job.
Right. So if there were one that you could pick up today, what would you really want to have?
Any one gun I would like to have today? Well, in the old ones, I think I'd like to have an Italian Ravelli. I've owned a couple of them in my life, but I don't have one now, and it's kind of a unique gun. I have a Felix that can be converted to shoot with 7.62 by 39 ammunition.
Okay.
And that's available. 6.5 Italian is not.
Yeah, awesome.
And a modern gun, the gun I would love to have, because I think it's the epitome of machine gun design, is the PKM.
Okay.
What's so great about the PKM is that the designers used every facet, every bit of recoil energy to make the gun work. They put the belt feed slide over to the right so that the recoil energy would run the belt across. You could probably drag a 250 round belt across the ground because of the power. The extraction, now the MG34, 42, M60, M249, 240, all of them have to push a round out of a link.
Right.
Now, if the ammunition is dirty or rusty or wet or dented or the links are not perfect, you'll often have the bolt go part way forward, unable to push the round out. All you have is a recoil spring.
Right.
PKM doesn't do that. It uses the recoil energy to pull the round out of the link and drop it down into a little trough, and all the bolt has to do is push it forward. No work at all. No work in loading the belt across, no work in extracting, no work in chambering the round.
Okay.
And as a result, it just always works.
I have heard.
And it's a basic, very simple concept. Now, if you take almost every machine gun the spring, the recoil spring, which can be weak, or it can be stuck, or it can be broken, has to do most of the work.
Yeah, it does.
Well, a lot of
sense.
most of the work, but in many cases, a lot of the work. And when you depend on a spring to do the work, when the force of recoil could do it, I think you're missing a bet.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's why I think the PKM is the greatest design. And I know somebody who, the U.S. Army wanted to replace the tank machine gun about 30 years ago. They had a thing called, I think, 240, forget the name, M73.
Yeah.
They had that. It was a dismal failure. And they thought, well, we can use the PKM. And they converted, the government converted 4 PKMs to shoot 7.62 by NATO ammo. It worked fine. Took months of work. It's very difficult conversion. Very difficult to do that.
Okay.
And they did it. They worked fine. And they brought them to Fort. The story I have is they brought them to Fort Knox to be tested in the tank program. And the colonel in charge of the tank program said, a Russian machine gun on an American tank? Well, as long as I'm in the Army. And the whole thing got scrapped. I said, well, what happened to the guns? Well, they didn't need them anymore, they destroyed them. I said, my gosh, after all that work, we should have put one in Aberdeen and one in Springfield Armory and one at Rock Island and one at the Marine Corps Museum, and they'd be available to students of weapons. No, they destroyed them.
Well,
and it was a very good idea, and it didn't fly because it was not invented here. And that's what I always find wrong. NIH seems to be everything. If it wasn't invented here, it can't be any good. And that is not the case. Yeah. Foreign countries are very different on that. The British picked up the Bren, although they had a very good gun, which was called the, I forget Vickers Berthier, which is just as good as the Bren. Yeah. But they thought the Bren was a little better, and even though it was a foreign gun, they picked up on that. And they picked up on the Maxim, which was built by an American. And the Germans, well, they had their own designs, but they picked up on foreign guns. And the Russians will pick up anything if it's better than what they got. But not us. Yeah. We won't do that. And that's what I find is a very bad thing. Now maybe it got a little bit better on the M249 and the M240, because those are actual guns made in Belgium. It's still a basic American design, grounding design. So.
Right.
And I think we should study more what foreign countries are doing.
Definitely.
And pick up some good ideas, rather than just,
just look
make sure they call it the mortgage syndrome too. How are the engineers going to pay their mortgages if we adopt foreign designs? And that's something that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's...
we're certainly trying to publish a lot of information on American guns and every foreign gun we can get our hands on.
Yeah, well, as far as collecting goes, I think it's what I think is very interesting about gun collecting. When I was a kid, an M1 rifle, a carbine, the stuff that was current at the time, all the old timers looked at that in this day. That's all modern stuff. They liked Sharps rifles and 4570s and Spencers and Winchesters and Colts and stuff. Now, the people, the young guys today, they like the modern plastic stuff, the black rifles. That's, everybody's hot on that. And the old timers say, oh, that's all new stuff. You got to go back to the good old days when they had stuff like M1s and then carbines and Stromgeweers and things, which now is considered antique. Right. But it was the state of the art when I was a kid. And only a totally different group of people collect the true antiques, which is the Spencers and the Sharps and all that.
And in another 50 years, people will be looking back on AR-15s.
That's the whole thing. Now we got caseless ammunition. Look at this. You're shooting something with a brass cartridge case, wasteful. That's not modern technology. That's antique. We're going to have caseless ammunition.
Yeah.
With just a bullet with a little powder charge behind it, which consumes itself, so you don't need a cartridge case. Of course, that's a very difficult technology because what the heat of the gun is going to, you have to have something to insulate that powder from the heat. of the gun. So
Right.
maybe they'll figure out something that they'll make a powder that won't blow up if it's exposed to heat.
Yeah.
Only if it's fired by an electric spark or something. They'll probably come up with something like that and put our current guns all into the category of antique.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, that's
Fantastic. I appreciate your time.
okay. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Cool. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Check out ForgottenWeapons.com. We have a whole bunch of information on all sorts of interesting pieces and cool videos with people like Mr. Goldsmith here. Thanks for watching.